Well, probably not real good lighting, but it's good for me. And I haven't been on here in a bit. Kind of promised the last time. But I was reading a very, very, very old book. And it's actually dated 1892. And I love collecting vintage books, but I also like reading them. And this one actually is based on Hermione, who is, well, it's Victor Hugo. I don't know if you know who Victor Hugo is. And it's the controversy that took place when this particular play went from French into English, and during that time period, how that became kind of the norm that started happening. Uh, Most of your Italian didn't get touched as much, but the first 20 plays of Shakespeare weren't even transcribed until like late 1770 something to 1780. In other words, it was I don't know, time period that I don't think people realize. I don't know, or if they care. But that's what I was doing. Hey, other things I do, I'm just kind of reintroducing myself because during this time period, this quarantine, for me, I've been a person that has been adjusting to being social distancing only because I didn't know it was anxiety. I just thought I didn't have tolerance. So, long story short, this is one of the things I draw. And let's see what else. I like to draw a lot. And I forgot I could draw. I forgot. I had, when I was younger, and like I said before, some of what I do is for posterity. It's for my family. My grandkids that are getting older and have lives. And, I don't want them to ever say, boy, I wish I'd spent time with my Mimi, what they call me. And asked her questions about A, B, C, or D. I have journals and I have filled in a lot of gaps there. But love designs like this. Love, love. I love Victorian, Edwardian, Gothic kind of stuff. Edgar Allan Poe-ish, darkness. I have to really fight that kind of stuff sometimes. Most times. And I think about people who are not accustomed to, maybe it just eventually, the games get old. Now, some people, they can stay on them for days, weeks. If anything, they're like, hurrah, I can do this. For me, myself, I would think, there's not everybody does that. They might do it for a bit, go downstairs, maybe eat something. But I would think that inevitably it would get, that was my attempt to do a hand. Just bored. So I had suggested to somebody, and they were totally, it was on YouTube, and I had made a comment on something I saw, and they came back talking about the video itself, saying, boy, I wish I had done those kind of things, or I could do those kind of things, and I haven't done half those things. And I said, well, why can't you, take a stroll through the environment that you live in. Go through, if there's little parks, or, walk. Get outside and see what kind of flowers, see what kind of plants that grow. Look them up. See if they're herbs. See if you can use them in something you cook, because cooking is a really good outlet. And I say food is love all the time. And I enjoy it. I enjoy not only cooking, but I enjoy making up a meal, which is bad if it's real, real good, because I can't think of how I did it. But that one. Yeah, I love that. So, I love predatory type of birds, like hawks, eagles. I never really this is when I first started back drawing, and I'll give you a little history because I started to say it. It's only been I've been drawing for 2 years, and I used to draw with my maternal uncle. My mother had two brothers. They were both born within a year and a half of each other. This is one was 1939 and the other was like 1940-ish. One, maybe. Barely. And I say this because my mother was 8 years older than them, and they were in the hills of Kentucky. That's where 90% of my people come from, etc. And when my grandmother gave birth to my first uncle, he was severely handicapped. Neither one of them never stood upright. Their hands are bent, their bodies, the torso is solid, but the rest of it is kind of not. The legs are inward, and she just had a real difficult time during that time. And the doctor told my grandmother on my first uncle being born, who's the one that taught me to draw, my Uncle Don, and draw and paint. And he said, don't have any more children until there's medications, there's this, that, and the other, which I'll get into that in a few minutes. So, needless, she got pregnant again. Boom. Had my second uncle, Tom. And same thing. So, I didn't even question all my life. I grew up with them, didn't think twice. I'd ride on the laps going to museums or going out and doing stuff, and riding on the laps in the wheelchairs, playing, sitting outside with them, doing I've just always known them to be this way. This is just life. Until I got pregnant with my first child. And that time, my husband worked nights. I was probably 8 months pregnant. And I shot straight up out of bed, almost half asleep, when I realized I had, that time, never asked why they were the way they were. My mother had passed away earlier. She died in the pandemic of 1968 to 1973, which was called the Hong Kong flu. It was a milder pandemic, but needless, very aware of I'm very aware of pandemics because I lost even a great aunt to Spanish flu. Let's just say I've always had an interest. Anyway, so I go to my grandma's the next day. I was early, and I asked her, and she said that she had contracted a venereal disease from my grandfather, and they were treating her with penicillin, and that she was told to be on this regimen, and she didn't, and so needless. And so I was just dumbfounded by that. Many years later, even after she had passed, I had told my now surviving uncle that, just one of the two, that she had said this. Oh my God, he's angry at me. No, there's documentation of others, and da-da-da-da, and she don't know what she was talking about. And I thought, oh yeah, she did. Because it just made sense to me. It just made sense to me. Anyway, so the oldest of the two, my Uncle Don, is the one who taught me everything. Taught me lines, and shadowing, and mediums, and he'd pull a hair out of his beard. This man was a spectacular artist. He even took contracts and painted for anything anybody wanted. He would paint. If they said, I want this particular Mother Goose with such and such and such, and because he did that for me, I said I want to do this for my son's room, and he did this little wagon in there with my son's name on it, anything, and he made a living at that. He didn't start getting any kind of disability till many moons later. They both were not supposed to live until their early 20s, and like I said, one now who's been married for 40 years, And he and his wife, she's as tall as I am. You know, they're very much in love. She was a neighbor of my grandparents when my uncle met her, and it was just cute how they met. So anyway, he has worked for uh, the Bureau of the State Departments in different areas, from Alaska all the way to New Mexico, up to Ohio, to all over. He's retired now, but I mean, they're badass. They both were just bad. They are. And I just took it for granted. I took it for granted and never realized what I had around me um, till I was older. And I think that's kind of normal that we do that. I think that's something that we um, don't recognize or see or appreciate. You know, maybe until we get into that spot or that position, or miss that person. So I want to kind of share a little bit about them, because I don't get to talk about that enough. I don't like to bore my people, but I know that there'll come a day, because I've done it. This is this little tree of life. I like things like tree of life. I like things like arrows that are decorative, and um, I'm not really good at people. I'm trying. It's just never been my thing. I do stuff like, you know, quotes, poems, anything that's over 100 years old that I'm not going to get copyrighted on. It's just depends on who the author. I mean, there might be, if I got real popular and I'm using Conan Doyle stuff, well, of course. Or people that's got, still family around, that's collecting monies. But the majority, some of these stuff that I use are people's never even heard of. George Sands. I love George Sands in poetry. And George Sands is a female that is George without an E in the early 1920s. Just fabulous, just beautiful stuff. That, like I said, that time period, there were so many that came out of that during that time. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I haven't finished this one really. Some of these I've drawn, sometimes I go back to them, because I just feel like there's not enough. And I want to tinker with black canvas, not just drawing pads, but I want to actually get in there and do something a little bit more. So anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope that you're staying focused and not taking life so seriously, because I promise what's going on now is nothing to what it could be. Nothing that we could have a second round real easy. Viruses are like that. They change, they mutate, they come back around. Everybody thinks that they're still looking for a cure for AIDS, and the virus, the first thing, which is before the disease, has so many different strains now. I don't see it coming anytime soon. Now, they do prolong life with medication, which is the best thing. I worked in the system many years as a HIV AIDS counselor. Worked in the prison system as a counselor for many years. I started out as a phlebotomist, which led me into many other things, going back to school, went back to college. And I hated school growing up, hated high school, couldn't wait to get out. And within 10 years afterward, I went back. I wanted more. Did I just show you all this? Yeah, I did, didn't I? Don't you love that? That's just cool. Little alphabet-y calligraphy. I'm going to leave you with one thing, because I'm a boomer, and I think about things that are no longer. But when I was growing up, penmanship, you were judged on that. You were graded on that all the way to high school. And my dad used to just hover over me, smack my hands, do whatever. It took me forever to even learn cursive. I just wasn't that person. But today, isn't it something how stuff comes around? Because now I'm like practicing different, the fonts, but I'm doing it manually. I'm not, even though I do like some that are on these apps or different stuff. I think they're pretty cool. So, with that, I'm out for now, and it's good talking to y'all. And you have a blessed day, and we'll talk again. Peace.